Hi, my name is Francesco Leone, and we are here for the panel Go Big or Go Home. It was about US market entry. I'm Italian descent. I live in the Bay Area, worked in consumer goods, technology. Last job right now is on a little bit more than a startup scale up in software as a service, artificial intelligence used as well to analyze different data from social media to others and profile audiences and consumer insights, working with companies from Coca-Cola to other big companies around the world. Today, we're going to focus on everything that is involving international companies mainly as well, but all the challenges and opportunities entering a market as big and as complex as the US. And I want to now introduce my panel members, and I'm going to go to first Jeff.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jeff Wallace. I am the co-founder of a couple of startup accelerators here in the Bay Area, working with hundreds and hundreds of companies, over 1,000 companies in the last 6 years. So my full-time endeavor is to support entrepreneurs who are trying to either grow their markets in the U.S. or international entrepreneurs seeking to enter into the U.S. markets. So I'm excited to be here and share some of my thoughts. Thanks very much for having me.
And now up to Chris.
Hello, everyone. My name is Chris Maycumber. I'm the CEO of Who Knows, and we're a Silicon Valley startup that's focusing on basically building a lead gen laboratory for B2B startups to figure out what their optimal growth engine is. So we have some AI goodness, some data, and some analytics to kind of help you figure out what works best, and love to help companies come in from abroad to penetrate the US.
And David.
Hi, David Mitroff with Piedmont Avenue Consulting. I teach at University of California, Berkeley, mentor for Google Startup for Accelerators. And my company and I do a lot of work with international companies, both me flying over there and doing keynote talks, and then also helping do accelerators and people come here. Also do a lot with international trade, especially in Los Angeles.
Well, I will jump in right away in the discussion. And first, a bit more generic question for every member of the panel. What do you think is the biggest challenge facing companies coming from abroad into the US?
I think the biggest challenge is that we're a huge country, and it's very, very different depending on which market you're trying to go into. And a lot of people have experiences where they get approved by some state department or they get an official approval, and now they're eligible in the whole state and they can work with one person or one government agency. Here in the United States, sometimes you have to go city by city or school by school to get your product in. And it's very difficult and challenging if you try to just come here and do that yourself.
Yeah, I'll jump in and agree with David's point. I think that we're not a homogenous country. And so we have a lot of things that are done at the state level or even at a local level that are not, there's not a big top-down approach to doing business in the U.S. I also think a challenge is a lot of foreign founders, there's ways of making yourself more attractive as a company coming in, specifically if you're seeking investment, for example. A lot of companies ask, will U.S. investors invest in my, fill in the blank the country, Turkish, Swedish, Japanese, et cetera, South American, countries. You pick the country. They ask if the investors will invest in those. And more often than not, U.S. investors are more comfortable investing in U.S.-based companies. So having to go through all of the steps necessary to establish yourself as a U.S. entity with U.S. banking relationships, even before you can take in your first dollar, you have to do some of those things to remove any friction that might, be in between you and an investor being able to financially support you. So there are some things that have to happen even in advance. So again, this is specific to if you're looking to raise capital from U.S. investors. And there are just things like that have to be done on those levels before you even get here.
It's so funny, like a lot of startups, we all have hubris and like, oh, we're going to conquer the world, right? And we're just, whether it's US going abroad or someone from abroad coming to the US, there's that honest, almost naivete that makes startup founders successful, right? Because they don't even realize how hard it's going to be, and they'll dip their toe in the water as opposed to diving straight in. Usually the mistakes we've seen are people trying to do just that. They're like, oh, we'll just replay the playbook and I'll handle it remotely. The people that we see really are successful are the people that come and live here, for 6 months, as long as the visa will allow, get dirty, hire the right people, and really dive straight in as opposed to taking half measures.
Yeah, and I host tons of events in person and virtual now, of course, but in person. And there's always someone. Oh yeah, I'm here representing this company. They just sent me here, or the company's over there, and they hired me to go network and get them new business or something. And so they don't know where to go or who to meet or what's going on. And so you have to have a strategy for go to market. And I think that's part of what this thing is about. What's your strategy? And do you have one? And that's where Jeff, Chris, and I, and Francisco too, we all have strategies of how to go to market. And we've seen lots of people come here and just, I don't know, lost.
I think to your point, David, the important point is warm connections, right? It makes all the difference in the world. If you just kind of get off a plane and think you're going to make it work, it's going to be challenging. I'm not saying it can't happen. I'm just saying the probabilities are lower. And if you want to maximize your chances of success, come in here with some warm connections, warm introductions, and then leverage. Always be asking people, hey, do you know anyone else who I should speak to while I'm here? Try to leverage the networks of those that you have access to. Even if it's a small number, they tell two friends and they tell two friends and so on and so on. You can make a very productive visit.
Yeah, and by the way, though, it's the exact same thing. Like we've all helped companies. I've helped companies go to Korea and go here and go there. It's the exact same thing. You have to have connections over there. And so Jeff, Chris, and I, we all have, and Francisco, obviously in Italy, we all have connections over there too. And so it goes back and forth, and it's totally different. You have to have government people, you have to have business people, you have to have distributors, you have to have different connections over there than you have over here. And either way you're going.
How much have you seen in your interaction with companies? And I take it from personal experience, having seen Italy, Scandinavians. How much is a cultural issue facing? Like a lot of companies I've noticed from Europe tend to come and send their own people to the US, whatever. They maybe are a little bit afraid to hire people they don't know, they're not loyals, or they don't know the owner. And as such, they make the first misstep is instead of hiring or connecting with people and resources that are in the place, Americans, they understand the market, they are, let's say, arrogant or enough to say, we can do it by ourselves and send the people. And I saw the same thing going on the other way. The difference is that a US company can afford many more mistakes because they already went into a big market. They have much more money to go versus an Italian or French has very few chances of making a mistake and making a misstep in entry in a market like US. And I was wondering whether you had this experience or something that you see many times into your dealing with international companies.
It definitely was an early part of my career, kind of the ignorant American that went abroad and was like, oh, I'll just sell in Australia and it works the same. And they should be happy that they're dealing with an international American company. And I left a year later empty-handed. It was a very, I had some bangers and mash, and that was about it. Appreciation of rugby. It's universal, right? It's human nature. It's not anything particular to any country. Everything, whether it's your vertical, whether it's your target micro segment, it's like any type of customer discovery, market discovery. You have to dive deep. You have to be local. You have to talk to hundreds of people, thousands of people to kind of adapt. And if you come with an open mind, and as long as you're doing the work, there's no reason you can't learn as quickly as anyone else. You might suffer a cultural handicap because you didn't grow up here and you can talk cricket instead of baseball or something like that. But at the end of the day, that's minor, right? It's about connecting with your customers about the problems they have. And, no country has a lead on doing that.
I like the thing of baseball. That was my first problem when I came in the US. I always had to learn the metaphors using baseball instead of football or whatever, soccer.
One thing I'll add to what Chris has said, and we've all traveled abroad, I'm assuming it sounds like all of us have experience internationally and working in other places. One thing I absolutely love about where we are here, I'm based here in Silicon Valley. I think all of us are basically in the Bay Area. One thing I love about it is so welcoming to international. My statistics are a little bit dated. I don't have a more current, but just a few years ago, 52% of the tech startups here in the Bay Area were founded by foreigners. I mean, how much more welcoming can you be when more than half of the companies in our area are founded by people who are not from here, from foreign founders? That's a pretty impressive, I would say, statistic to me. And all of us, again, deal internationally. I share that statistic when I'm out and about in other countries because people will say, well, how welcome will I be in the U.S.? They see news stories about the U.S. and not to get it into that realm of politics, but they see what they see and it causes concern. So they'll ask me things like, well, how welcome will I be? And I state that statistic and I say, I don't know how to make it more welcoming. I'm the minority here. You as a native born, white American male, I'm the minority in the area I operate. So it's an advantage, I think, where we are in Silicon Valley. Like we go back to the other comment, we're not a homogenous country.
Yeah.
It is not like that everywhere else in the U.S. But here where we are, it is that way. And I think it's really a good factor for founders from other locations to come into this area as their entry point.
I've been hosting over 50 events in person, now they're virtual, but over 50 events a year for the last 10 years. And at the W Hotel, at Google, at Yelp, at, all these different headquarters. And 25% of my audience is international. They come and they're here for a week or here for a month. They're here for 6 months, and they're just wanting to meet people from Silicon Valley and San Francisco and the Bay Area and learn. And some people don't speak English that well. That's okay, because there's always somebody else that speaks their language, and people want to learn. That's why people go to network and meet people. That's the whole point. The other thing that I would add that happens a lot, and I think all of us see this a lot, I have this mobile app, or I have this idea that you've never seen before. I've seen it before. It's so rare that someone comes to me with an idea that I've never seen before, especially international people. They'll come to the US and say, I got this thing you've never seen before. Yes, I have. And then they get disappointed that someone else has done it. No, they should be excited that they're not the first to go to market, because they don't have to educate everybody as much. But second, they can learn, because I can tell them 9 times out of 10, I've seen this before. No, it's more than that. 99.7 times out of 10, I can say I've seen it before. And that company already pivoted. And you can go look at Crunchbase or go look at different sites, and you can see how they pivoted, where they pivoted, who they got money from. And that tells you a whole bunch of information. Before you just show up and start it, whatever, call all of us and ask us, what do we think? And we'll politely tell you what we think. And now you can pivot before you even get here.
I think, David, you're making a really good point. I had one company out of Eastern Europe that had an idea. It was artificial intelligence, chatbot type technology for banks. And it was working well in their home country. And they were very excited after finishing our acceleration program to come to the U.S. And we asked them to do an exercise. We said, before you even contemplate looking at airfreights and things like that, go on and do a competitive analysis. And we have a template, not unlike a lot of other templates out there you would look at for a competitive market or competitive landscape. And they did one, and they came back a couple days later, and we had a discussion. And there were 32 companies here in the U.S. doing what they were doing. They thought they were going to land here. So we said, well, do you want to land here and be number 33? Or do you want to keep building on the success you have where you are? And we actually helped encourage them to stay in their local market, in this case, and expand from there, which they've done. They've done well. We helped them incorporate in the UK, which made it easier for investors to have comfort to invest in their company versus their home country. So it is really interesting. They thought for sure they were going to land here and be the first one with this kind of solution. That was the first thought they had in their mind, but we showed them in short order they would have been number 33.
Before, there was another interesting point that I think people don't think about when you were talking about the Bay Area. It's true, the entry point is not just from an operational perspective, so the market where you want to enter and conquer, but as well where you're going to have more resources as well, more reception, a positive reception, other things like that, where you can integrate much faster as well in terms of investors and resources. And the Bay Area, maybe New York, are places where maybe a company want to start as well to establish their own kind of network and location, headquarters or whatever it is. Another question I have, because you raised, we were talking as well before about investments and companies as well relocating to the US in order to find US investors. Do you think it's changing? Are there any US investors well interested, for example, in investing companies that are not transferred into the US? Like, are there specific countries, like you mentioned before about this other company that was the number 24 in the market, about the fact of incorporating the UK? Do you think, for example, UK is a place where US investors are more comfortable, or are there other places? Or do you think for companies that want to raise money in the US, whatever, the only way is really to transfer their IP, to basically move the whole company, cap table, everything into the US?
I think there are some countries that US investors have higher degrees of comfort to invest in. UK would be one. Some of the larger Western European countries, Germany, France, I think there are some countries where some U.S. investors will find comfort. Canada here in North America, I think, is a comfortable area. Most of the time, however, if you're looking to raise capital, I ask one question of the investors. I say, well, how, they're typically from a foreign place, right? I'll say, how familiar are you with the U.S. investment laws? And they kind of shrug their shoulders because they're not, familiar with it. And I say, that's how comfortable U.S. investors are with your country's laws. So if you want to keep that friction point between you and the investors, I'm not saying they'll never get over that friction, but it's definitely going to take time now. Or you could set up a U.S. entity, make your home country company a subsidiary of it, and then all the IP is held within the U.S. entity, raise capital in the U.S. entity. That's a very comfortable thing in general.
And it's not as complicated as they think. It's not as expensive as they think. It's not as complicated. Right. Lots of companies like Jeff's can help them do that. It's not rocket science.
One additional point I'll make, Canada is an example where I do not recommend that because the Canadian government is so friendly and offers so much resource to Canadian companies that if they did that inversion where they make their company a subsidiary, they would lose that funding. So we generally don't recommend that with Canada. And if other countries had similar government type support that would be at risk of losing it, I would not recommend that strategy. But Canada right now is the only one on that list that's a definitive for me when they're able to reach into the government resource bucket.
But also, if you do set up the company here, then the state of California and the federal government, the U.S. government will start giving you money and start helping you because now you're a new company here too. And if you start deciding to manufacture here, then there's all kinds of international trade and all kinds of money and all kinds of things you can get. And maybe you get that money instead of getting investors' money.
I'd really be asking yourself, why are you trying to come to the U.S. to raise money, right? Do you think it's easier? Because it won't be. It's just as hard. Whatever type of larger market size you have here just makes you that 33rd chatbot AI startup that they've seen a dozen times already this year, as opposed to it's so impressive over the last 15 years, like the growth of the VC market, not just from verticalization in the US, but going abroad, right? And hitting up people that want to, take a microcosm, like the amount of Midwest VC venture capitalists in the US is amazing. Like I almost want to move to Montana to do a startup because there's just so much less competition in finding local startups. So, Canada is amazing with how they're supporting. So come for the right reasons. Don't just look at, oh my God, there's, 1,000 VCs I could go talk to because they won't care.
I thought that thinking about localization and becoming transfer in the US and everything, I thought who did actually quite a good job, at least in tech, was the Israelis companies. I always take them as an example of companies that became US. They take advantage of having very good, strong tech locally, so they have a good business model. They don't need to have the R&D in the US, but they set up company, everything back in the US and become almost a US entity, totally.
We can look like Wix.com. There's a whole bunch of them.
Yeah.
Well, they also have a very strong diaspora. Israelis can find other Israelis here who have kind of been down the track before. They've kind of blazed the trail. Generally speaking, at least those that I've worked with, they're very friendly to other Israeli companies coming over, and they try to lend their knowledge and experience to help those others. So they're not the only one, but they certainly are a very strong group of entrepreneurs that are now based here that definitely help their kind of home country, brothers and sisters in entrepreneurial arms, if you will.
When we were talking even before the panel, I think one of the things that I try as well to reinforce with companies, Italian companies coming here, is we talked about as well customer support, and as well how in US customer support at a certain level may have to be totally different, not totally different, but much better than in other countries. Can you expand a little more on that as well? And I think that's an important topic as well for people planning to come here, not as only just manufacturing everything and having great product, but how they support their customers.
Here, there's so many, the client base is so diverse, and people want an 800 number to call and ask questions. And people want to know where the product came from and where it's going and if it's going to be around a long time. And especially if it's hardware, they don't want to buy it and then there's no support for it. And then are you going to go retail or go direct to consumer? And are you going to use distributors? It just keeps adding and adding. And you want to go into Best Buy, you want to go into Target, you want to do Amazon, And all those platforms, it doesn't matter if it's Amazon or Best Buy or Target, they all want customer support. They all want people to interact directly with the consumer. Or do you go through a distributor that does that for you? So it starts getting more and more complex.
One of the presentations I give is entitled, "Do you want these three letters ROI? Focus on these two letters UX." And when I think about UX, I don't think about UX with just the product, right? If it's a hardware product, I'm not just thinking about how I use that product. I'm thinking about the research I'm doing to identify the product I want to buy. So I have to be able to find good information that's clear and articulate, easy to understand and easy to find about the product. It has to be an easy sale process. Now I've bought the product. Now I get home and I use the product. That has to be good. But exactly to the point of the question, Francesco, it's that post-sale service and support. There will come a point in some products where you will need post-sale support. All of the entirety of that is your user experience. And you have to maximize a good user experience if you want to be a successful company driving ROI for yourself. So I think you have to think through all of those things. And yeah, there is a high expectation, to David's point, about being able to easily access that kind of post-sale service and support. And I think you have to think about what channels and who maybe you partner with people who do that. But one way or another, you have to think about doing it. It can't be a box left unchecked, for sure.
And definitely in other countries, I've worked with internationally in other countries where the director of whatever says this is an approved product and now everyone uses it. Versus in the US, it doesn't matter if a director of whatever says it's an approved product. People won't use it if they don't know how to use it or want to use it. So you got to provide all the stuff Jeff just said.
I had the pleasure of working for Intuit back in the days, and these guys taught me how to be so crazy about literally standing outside the store, seeing if people bought TurboTax, going to that person's office, watching them do the taxes, right? That Jane Goodall, Gorillas in the Mist type. I would encourage any startup, whether you're using distributors, channels, whatever, especially in the days when you're in that rapid learning mode, you can't lose that customer channel. Whether it's customer support, sales, marketing, you need to have a unified view. The CEO needs to be leading the culture from the get-go, because especially as you're coming into the new market, you may have everything figured out in your existing markets, but you're using the wrong colors, you're using the wrong phrasing, whatever that is. And if you don't have a tight connection with your customers, you're going to lose quarters and years of progress.
And that's where stores like Beta, you can have your product there. They have cameras on the people. They're watching the people, and you're getting all this data, how they're interacting with your product and how they read the description, or how the person at the beta salesperson is interacting with people. Mm-hmm. It's all recorded.
When we talked about the investment and obviously the complexity of customer support and localization, have you noticed in your interaction with company coming to the US, some pattern of why companies succeed and how company that failed? Is there something like company failed because it didn't, coming to the US, one of the major reasons is they didn't get enough funding, or they come and they don't have product support, or is there some kind of pattern that you can recognize on success and failure of company coming to this country? I think a big piece of it is consistent with just the broader industry surveys. The top reason companies don't succeed is product market fit. They're just they believe that in the lovely offices of their garage or their home office or wherever they're creating their business, that they've got it figured out. They understand exactly what the market needs. And more often than not, I think it's 42% of company failures are attributed to product market fit failure. Not having enough money is up there, but it's not the top reason companies fail. Mm-hmm. Another high up reason is the team. They don't have the right team. It's a little bit of that notion of, would you rather have an A team with a B product or a B team with an A product, right? Everyone should wisely choose an A team, because whatever the product, they'll figure it out. That's what an A team can do. So oftentimes, I think they just fall short in probably those two areas. Money is probably, to me, it's usually the third or fourth thing a startup founders or founding team needs, but it's always the first thing they think they need. And I think that's a mistake. They come in here thinking we need money. If we just had money, we'd be successful. And that's just not the case. And in many cases, I actually think if you get money too early, it's a bad thing. I think it creates bad behaviors and encourages bad behaviors. So I would say product market fit, team are kind of high on the list of the reasons for what I see when companies don't make it.
So for me, the number one reason they fail is because they don't ask anyone or ask any customers what they think, to try. They just they're engineers. They make something that they think people want. And they just keep making things they think people want without actually asking anybody what they want. Mm-hmm. But because people want this and they just make it, that's the number one reason they fail in my mind. The number one reason they succeed is when you describe the product, people start smiling. Even if it's a bad product, just people smile. They like the idea. Like you could just see everybody just starts smiling, like they laugh or they smile. That's a really interesting idea. Even if it's the same thing they've seen 100 times, but just the name of the product or the way it's packaged or something about it, just this seems fun because people want to be part of something that's fun. Customers want to buy things that are fun. It could be something like, a toothbrush, but just the way it's, that's fun. I like it. And so that's the number one, people remember it, they recall it, people get excited. And that's the ones that on the cover of TechCrunch magazine, or that's the ones people are telling other people about. And that's where you get that, word of mouth and, the tipping point and all this kind of stuff, because people are like, it's different. It's interesting. Even if it's the same thing you've seen 100 times, it's just that the way they say it or the way they positioned it or something about it, or the little character, they have a little character or whatever it is, mascot or something, it makes people smile. That's the number one reason I've seen businesses.
David, to your point, I use a description of a lot of companies talk about MVPs, the minimum viable product. And I get a lot of companies, they'll come to me either to raise capital as an investor, to get introductions to other investors or acceleration programs, what have you. And they'll say they're so excited to tell me about their MVP. And I normally, with a little bit of purpose in my behavior, I normally say, I really don't care about your MVP. And they look at me like, what do you mean you don't care? We built an MVP. And I say, all that tells me is you know how to build something. It doesn't tell me anyone cares. So I talk about MVT, minimum viable traction. Is anyone actually deriving benefits that you tell them they can derive from your thing? Inherent in an MVT is that you have the MVP, right? But an MVP in and of itself just says I know how to build something. It doesn't say anyone cares. So I think it's a huge distinction, and a lot of people focus on the MVP where they should be focusing on the traction piece to that.
I was using the term minimum delightful product, but I like yours better, I think, because so many of these founders, me included, I'm a product guy. I get so fascinated by our technology and our product, and, our customers love it and, great. But at the end of the day, especially when you're raising money, it's a business. It's not the product, right? It's, do you have a business that can monetize that product? And traction is the number one thing if you're raising money or getting here. Like, cool tech, awesome. Lots of cool tech around here. Doesn't matter if you can't build a business around it. So
it's the key to unlocking investment. Traction.
It's all that matters.
Absolutely.
And I think, to all your points, you think about these founders and you have to be very cognizant of getting in the echo chamber, right? Where it's just your team slapping each other on the back saying, oh my God, this is awesome. And this looks great. If the founder or your product guy or your sales guy isn't talking to like 4 or 5 customers a day and reviewing the pitch or the positioning or how you're doing support, then you're not learning fast enough. And all that stuff that Jeff mentioned earlier, not having enough money, it's really about just how many at-bats do you get, to use a baseball reference in America, how many attempts do you get to get it right? And that's all money is. You have a certain amount of attempts, depending on how good your team is and how quickly they can learn, you have that many attempts to figure out the MVT. And then you're out of a job. So
and it really comes down to, instead of here's our product or here's our service, and then just listen to what they say.
Yeah.
They say, oh, I could use it for this. Yeah. And don't say, we don't use it for that. Use it for this. No, let them finish, oh, I could use it for this. I could use it for that. And then maybe you want to pivot that way.
Yep.
The last point I would make is a lot of companies talk about the product. What they should be talking about is the values that can be derived from the use of the product. That's the challenge I think a lot of companies have, especially when coming from other places. They get impressed with their ability to build something, but not the value that people get from it.
I wanted just to close with one headline for each on something that is not the elephant, but the virus in the room. And want to see if there's anything related to post-COVID life in the US that you think will influence, will change anything of we've discussed today, or that is going to be important to think about whether it's an investment or whether it's a go-to-market that will affect what companies coming to US will have to consider coming forward.
So I've been in magazines about this exact topic, And I believe it's way easier to go global now, because before everyone believed to expand into a new market, whether it's a US company or whatever, to expand a new market, you had to move there or put someone there. And people wouldn't want to meet with you or feel as comfortable doing virtual. Now, everyone's been forced to do more virtual, and people are okay with that. So now, instead of you can expand before you even get there. So just let's go in this market, and let's virtually meet with people. And so you don't need to necessarily physically fly there just yet. So you can get away with more virtual meetings than you've ever thought of in your entire life, and people are more okay with that. And that's a huge game changer, that you don't have to get on an airplane and fly all the way there to have like a 5-minute meeting. Big, that's a game changer right there.
Yeah, I think to that point, obviously everyone's thought about this. The acceleration of the digital world just gained like an extra 10 years, right? Some of the stuff we thought it would take a decade to get to, whether it's remote collaboration or workspace, or just in our space, everyone who used to use physical marketing is now being forced to be a digital marketer, because events no longer work, signage no longer works. If you're in that digitization space, you just got the future handed to you on a silver platter.
Silicon Valley in Your Pocket is one of my accelerators, and it happened to have been built in 2018, long before COVID. It was built virtual, and that was a unique differentiator at the time. Now everyone's been forced to go virtual. It's no longer a differentiator, so we add value in other ways, hopefully. But I do think the comfort level of people being able to do business virtual is at a level we would not have imagined 2 years ago at this time now. So I think it was going to be much further out. There was still that look someone in the eye, shake their hand. Now it's kind of like everyone's been forced to get comfortable virtual. And I think it is a game changer. I think David's made a really great point, and I see that in just the nature of the business I do. And again, I used it as a differentiator. I've had to rethink how to differentiate what we do, because everyone's gone virtual now. So it's a comfortable level for people to operate at nowadays.
Yeah. And it's going to change as well all immigration and other policies, because it's going to change a lot of things that were taken before now are changed completely. So that's great. Thank you so much, everybody. And I think we'll end it here. And hopefully, it would be nice to go on for a few hours, because I think it's a great topic. But we'll see then for the live Q&A. And thank you again, everybody, for the really kind of very exciting discussion.
Thank you so much. Great chatting with everybody today. Thanks again.
Thanks.
Thank you.